Welcome. My name is Morgan Pedreza, and I am a member at large for the Graduate Student Caucus of the Comic Studies Society. Our organization is dedicated to supporting graduate students and early career scholars working in the field of comic studies. For folks who are just learning about our organization, we'd love to meet you. We aim to foster community, mentorship, and professional development through events, resource sharing, and advocacy. The Graduate Student Caucus provides a platform for emerging voices in the discipline, encouraging collaboration, public scholarship, and inclusive dialogue across institutions and areas of study. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to the next event in our professional development series, Radical Visions, Feminism, and Freedom, a dialogue with Melinda Gebbie. The event today highlights the powerful ways that public scholarship can challenge, inspire, and expand the field through sharing and conversation. Melinda Gebbie is an underground comics legend, a branch of the radical tradition from 20th century San Francisco, and an expat based in the UK, whose work has international acclaim through titles including Frescozizi's and Lost Girls. Gebbie's cultural critiques, protest art, and erotica have undergone controversy, censorship, celebration, and profound study for decades. Gebbie's paintings, illustrations, and sequential narrative remain central to feminist historiography, media studies, queer studies, and discourses around structural suppression and countercultural movements. Her latest art book, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, showcases her enduring legacy as an unapologetic, anti-establishment artist and intellectual. Joining her in conversation is Dr. Melanie West, an award-winning artist, academic, and internationally published author, whose interdisciplinary work bridges literature, comics, and cultural critique. A PhD in ethnic studies from UC San Diego, and the creator of the webcomic Doomed for Good, West lectures at California State University, Los Angeles, and recently authored the introduction to Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, the definitive art book showcasing Gebbie's timeless and transgressive life's work. So please join me in welcoming Melinda Gebbie and Dr. Melanie West.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for those wonderful opening remarks, Morgan. I am going to take it from here and share my screen now so that we can jump into what is going to be a brief lecture giving context to Melinda Gebbie's work, and then we will move into the interview. So, hello, everyone. I am so glad to be here today with everybody, and it is truly my honor and privilege to be able to facilitate this brief lecture and the interview with the singular Melinda Gebbie. All right, let's begin. Radical Visions, Feminism and Freedom, a dialogue with Melinda Gebbie. My name is Dr. Melanie West. I am again an internationally published writer, illustrator, and cultural critic with a PhD in ethnic studies. I am currently a professor at California State University, Los Angeles, and the Pan-African Studies Department, and I run the webcomic titled Doomed for Good. It is again my honor to facilitate this interview with my dear friend Melinda Gebbie. Today, we celebrate her incredible life, her legacy, and her definitive art book, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, debuting through the underground comics publisher Knockabout Press in London. But before we proceed to the interview, I will again provide a brief lecture about Gebbie's work and how I came to write the introduction to her art book. In 1947, San Francisco saw the birth of Melinda Gebbie, who would rise to international fame in the underground comics movement. She became publicly known for her controversial work, including her comic Frescozizi's, banned in the UK, and her 3-volume graphic novel Lost Girls, made in collaboration with her husband, Alan Moore. Her work and legacy have also been extensively discussed in the YouTube docu-series titled Bad Girl, Sad Girl, Mad Girl, Art of Melinda Gebbie. I strongly encourage watching all 3 videos as Gebbie speaks eloquently about her own work and motivations. Importantly, I also became aware of Gebbie when I watched this docu-series during my undergraduate years. The series had a profound impact on me. The videos made me an avid fan of Gebbie and underground comics and solidified my drive to be a comics creator myself. But most importantly, the Bad Girl, Sad Girl, Mad Girl series brought Melinda and I together. I made contact with Melinda in 2023 after completing my doctorate. I bought a copy of Fresh Gazizis on eBay as a graduation present to myself. I reached out to Melinda with the currently realized intention of interviewing her. We became pen pals. Eventually, she invited me to write the introduction to her art book. In our letters, she shared with me her vow to be an artist at age 8 and the fact that she has lived as a hidden epileptic. Her spinning figure on the cover of her art book demonstrates this condition, alongside with the undeniable fact that Melinda has also been a unique beast. Gebbie defies conventional categories. As an artistic chameleon ranging in neon colors, style variations, and infinite subject matter. Her work remains central to discourses around censorship, protest art, queer studies, feminist erotica, and countercultural movements. I invite us to understand Gebbie's portfolio through 3 categories: the political, the use of color, and the use of form. Although I would argue all 3 themes collide in much of the work and deeply inform one another. But considering them distinctly allows us to further illuminate the inherent complexity and range of Gebbie's work. Concerning the political, Gebbie's first political act manifested at age 8 when she vowed to dedicate her life to art and at the time disavowed marriage. Gebbie's profound self-possession would lead her to refuse the still life exercises of her early art teachers and boldly craft her own visual language, particularly through the medium of comics, and particularly underground comics. Scholar Deborah Elizabeth Whaley states the term comix, spelled with an X at the end, refers to socially relevant underground and independent forms of comics. Scholar Rebecca Wanzo argues, early feminist comics were characterized by the sexual explicitness and taboo content typical of many underground comics, but a notable distinction was the privileging of women's experiences, political struggles, and pleasures. Wansno argues Lost Girls should be read as reminiscent of feminist cartoonists who intentionally depicted the taboo or obscene in order to address sexual and gender inequalities. Wasno asserts feminist comics relished a feminist grotesque and gleefully embraced fantasies of emasculating feminists. Such themes are present in Lost Girls, but also in Gebbie's prior comics. In Debasement depicts an alternative future in the year 2023, where a group of dominant women perform castration on a male captive. The shocking nature of the story provides a stage for cathartic female rage and inverts power dynamics experienced in historical patriarchal sexual violence. This story was included in Gebbie's 1977 solo collection titled Fresh Gazizis, translated to Fresh Cocks in Italian. Gebbie states in her memoir, Fresh Gazizis was meant to be a vaginocratic stab at the sexual outlook of men who considered women as something to be plundered. It turned the tables on the story of O and the writings of Marquis de Sade. Fresh Gazizis examined rape through a lens of action-based consecutive panels without words. At that time, rape was considered to be something which happened to women because they'd, left the stable door open, worn skirts that drove men to understandably wild behavior, or had awakened unfairly their out-of-control penises, which, like guns, once cocked, must be free to shoot passerby. Further, Dr. Wozno argues Gebbie's work illuminates the mundanity of sexual injury. Acknowledging the pervasive reality of sexual trauma is important because it resists patriarchal scripts that brand survivors as broken. Processing the unfortunate but common occurrence of sexual violence presents an opportunity to destigmatize survivors and highlight the joyful possibility for community, pleasure, and healthy sexual practice that come from confronting and living forward with the trauma. Unfortunately, Gebbie's feminist erotica has experienced ongoing backlash. Fresh Kazizis remains banned in Britain on the grounds of obscenity due to its pornographic nature. But that has not stopped Melinda from generating political work. In a brilliant protest, she made an entire comic about her obscenity trial titled Public Enemy. Further, Gebbie has notably made impactful illustrations of central political figures, including Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Melinda's vision of Reagan as a demon from hell emphasizes how she knew Reagan-era policies would have a ruinous impact on the nation. Gebbie's portrait of Margaret Thatcher as the Greek god Kronos eating his own children and her comic Beryl's Fury were made in response to the 1984 to 1985 United Kingdom miners' strike. Next, Gebbie's use of color has always been arresting. Her incredible painting, Girl Fight Club, highlights the impact of fauvism in her work, a movement that encouraged an intuitive relationship with color. In the YouTube docuseries, Gebbie states, "Color is a music you can use in silence, and if you use it effectively, it creates music in the mind's eyes and ears." I agree. The figures may battle in Girl Fight Club, but they are equally vibrating with a near kinetic rhythm in the psychedelic palette. The Luna series earns its name as its engagement with color illuminates the page and further highlights Gebbie's use of form. The series showcases the enraging, gorgeous, and complex journey of feeling trapped in the social and political construction of cisgender white womanhood on a psychological and anatomical level. The first image states, Luna lives inside great anger as she is stuck within a body. Next, she is pummeled by voices like pistols in the second image and is bound by the anatomy of the ear canal, signaling that her autonomy is overcome and negotiated by external exposition. Luna is explicitly stuck within a vagina, and the series ends with her form ever more abstracted. As Luna's tongue sticks out, we see hints of Gebbie's epileptic condition, and in the frenzy of her contorted figure, we see how the identity of a life can be absented by the expectations of womanhood. Gebbie's masterful use of form continues in the painting Et in Arcata Ego. We see three distinct forms depicting the reimagined night Gebbie was raped at 18 and left for dead by a railway track. Gebbie tackles her trauma by reinventing the narrative of that night with a rescuing bicycle. A guardian angel sits at her back as a passenger, protecting Gebbie and directing her attention away from the perpetrator. Gebbie's body, thick and solid, flies forward, while the angel pulsates in long trendles of white, blue, purple, and faded pink. Inflamed in the protected purity of spirit, Gebbie races past her rapist, whose form disintegrates in the distance, breaking into particles of pointillism. The man's fatal power falls apart. Gebbie reclaims her corporeal dominion. I find this painting especially inspiring, as Gebbie and I are both survivors who have been failed on personal and formal levels, necessitating an artistic intervention to provide justice and support external forces cannot. Melinda Gebbie remains an extraordinary artist, writer, intellectual, and activist. In this last slide, I offer more images from Melinda's art book that were not discussed in this brief lecture, but certainly stand on their own. Further, alongside the upcoming release of the art book, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, she has also written a comprehensive and compelling memoir. In the autobiography, We'll All Be Sorry When We're Dead, Gebbie paints with words and uses gorgeous illustrative language to tell the story of her life and many adventures across several countries and incredible years. I am so humbled to say I am the first scholar to start reading this historic text, and I await its official publication with bated breath. It is now my honor to interview and turn our attention to the focal point of our event today, the absolutely singular and legendary Melinda Gebbie. Melinda, how are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you, Melanie. That's quite a lovely intro. I'm very touched. Yeah, you covered the waterfront with a lot of that.
I'm glad. All I want to do is honor you. So, should we jump right into the questions? I know I sent them to you
Certainly.
ahead of time, so you've had a lot of time to think about them. All right, I'll read
Yes.
each one off and then you give your response. So let's begin. First question. My first question concerns the article by Rebecca Wanzo I quoted in the speech and also sent to you. In the article, The Normative Broken, Melinda Gebbie, Feminist Comics and Child Sexuality Temporalities, published through Duke University Press, Dr. Wanzo argues your feminist erotica is an essential intervention in narratives and realities of sexual trauma. So, I asked, how has the practice of creating erotica empowered you as a woman, an artist, and a survivor?
Well, I think I had to dig it up for myself and cling to it. I was raised in a difficult environment, like many people, but my mother was a fascinating sort of beast. She was very ferocious, and she really hated being a mother with all her heart. And that was everything that she hated, I got fascinated with. My father got Playboy magazines every month. She'd throw them out, but I'd peek at them. She'd say, "You got 2 weeks to look at them, Gordon," and then they go in the trash. So, yeah, so my father and I hid our humanity from my mother. Um, he, poor soul, kind of faded away into a very well dressed ghost, having been a haberdasher for a living and a very lovely gentleman who had once been a musician before he met her. So I got my creative sensibilities from my father and my bloody minded spirit from my mother. So I got a powerful engine and aesthetics and a choice between two kinds of ways of being, one fading away and one being a monster. And I thought, just go for joy. Go for what excites you. I started as a child sitting in my little room, just, staying away from the yelling, and she didn't come into the room when I was in there. And so I was actually free to be completely uncensored from a very early age. And as long as she didn't find my books and throw them out, everything was okay. And I had free reign in my own world. I was very lucky. And I had nature as well. I could go out in the trees and play with my cat. So, yeah. But yeah, started out as a sort of a child nun of art, and it kept me going all this time. It's been my rock of Gibraltar.
Yes, and it's so evident and so clear in your work. Do you want to say any more, specifically in the ways in which the erotica has fueled your incredible engine as such a strong, independent mind and artist?
Well, yes, I think I thought fairly early now, if women were free to draw the kind of things that men are free to draw, how powerful is the female libido? Because from what I saw, men didn't want it to rear its tiny little head. So that was another way I fought back. I want to use everything I've got as a female to be my own warrior. And that's what I did. And I was amazed when I met other women cartoonists that they didn't have such a ferocity. Maybe they didn't grow within the kind of situation I did. So maybe they didn't need to. We all tried to get along with the guys. We all sort of tried to do the right thing, sort of, and then no, I got sick of it. I just, you know, I wanted to break free. And
Great for you did.
yeah, and you know, I've always found, I've always been very, very interested in everything that women are going through. And, and men were such macho cardboard figures. You know, the only people they'd be cruel with would be women because they were afraid of each other, and they seemed to be fairly useless, the lot that I knew in the underground scene. And the boys in school as well. I did caricatures of the boys when I was 13, drawing them looking ridiculous, which was very satisfying. you know I was my own judge. I've always been my own judge. We all must be our own judges, and we all must express what we feel.
Beautiful, incredible answer. All right, let's move to question number two. How did the culture of San Francisco at large, the home of the beat poets and many other underground comics creators and countercultural artists and thinkers, inform you as an artist?
Well, it was visually dizzying. It was an incredible time to be alive. If I hadn't been a hippie during that time, I wouldn't have had the time or the freedom or the lack of fear that upcoming generations, it's very, very hard on youngins today. I've got to say, I'm so proud of everyone who is making up their own minds and standing for what they feel. The intelligent ones, I mean, I'm not talking about the poor beleaguered creatures that go along with, this charade called a presidency. Um, Gosh, I've forgotten my point. Uh,
Okay, I can read the question again. Again, we are just considering how the culture of San Francisco at large, the home of the beats and many underground comic creators and countercultural artists and thinkers, informed you as an artist.
well, I was interested in the beats, first of all. And there was still a residue of beats in San Francisco. And I loved going to some of the old restaurants and seeing that people had written all over the walls and on the chairs and on tables. If they felt like writing poetry, they were free to do it. Um, then, well, the music was fantastic. The freedom was great, but there was also a kind of a sense of kids being on a chaotic sort of level, because it was like we didn't really have mentors. I mean, in San Francisco, There were a lot of kids who were ending up homeless on the streets. Of course, everybody was taking drugs, and things led to each other, and it was a mixture of things, but it was kind of like the Lost Boys Island. There's lots of freedom, but there's lots of danger. And so there was chaos and there was beauty. And it was very hard for a lot of people to uh, find a personal way in life, because there weren't really any mentors around. There were only pretend gurus and people who were taking advantage of the young for a lot of it.
Yeah. And in that incredible chaos, we can see how you truly came to be such an independent mind and artist, as you were clearly your own North Star. So do you want to move to the third question?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Okay, so your memoir states you learned the most important part of the San Francisco Beat movement was the City Lights bookstore, the first paperback only shop in America. But among the beats, you focus on Allen Ginsberg and the controversial seizure of his book, Howl. When US Customs released a paperback version of Howl that had been printed in England, the manager of City Lights bookstore, Goshi Morale, was arrested on grounds of obscenity. This led to a month-long trial, where the book was eventually exonerated on the basis of the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. In your memoir, you state this ruling would have an important impact on the artist you would later become. So, why do you think the First Amendment is fundamentally important to artistic expression?
I don't think it's possible to be able to express yourself without being imprisoned, or worse, without the freedom of speech. I see it being threatened in funny ways. Freedom of speech. There's a comedian named Graham Linehan in England, and he verbally threatened verbal violence against people that he accused of possibly being trans people, and said, if you think you see a man dressed as a woman, go and punch him in the bollocks. And he was let off of that charge. And so he has opened the way for people to be verbally violent. This is something that's been taken away from English, personal rights. So this is very worrying. I know all sorts of stuff is going on in America, but this is something new here. No, I don't think we have creativity without freedom of speech, unless we're going to hide while we do it. And people have had to hide in order to create. And if their work is lucky enough to be found, that's one thing. But who knows how many creative people we've lost because of unfair dynasties.
Yeah, and the ways in which particularly people abuse, right? The way in which freedom of speech, right, can be utilized specifically in your context, the way you're talking about the violent transphobia of this comedian inciting violence towards some of the most vulnerable populations, and then that creating an impact in which people are further suppressed. And unfortunately, it would create an impact in which the most vulnerable would also be suppressed from expressing themselves as well because of the violence that he has incited with his own speech. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
That is incredibly important to think about. All right, so next, question 4. You have been navigating censorship your entire life. In your memoir, you discuss how a teacher confiscated the erotic fiction you wrote as a minor. And you describe how you drew a poster for a Valentine's senior dance, which was nearly removed by angry parents because the illustration featured a nude Cupid and Psyche embracing, an image that you ironically based on the famous sculpture by Rodin. How did this early suppression of your work impact you and your evident commitment to making subversive art?
Well, I was absolutely delighted, actually. I mean, I didn't have any context for it, being a kid of, first 13, when my little erotic volume was taken away from me. And it was reported to me by another kid in a later class of the same teacher that she had that little pamphlet on her desk, although she told me she was going to throw it away because it was so disgusting. Um, and with the poster, well, it got into the local newspaper, the Mill Valley Record. And there was a very nice teacher who actually took up my cause and wrote a poem about my situation. So, yeah, I didn't know the word was infamy, but I found it very glamorous to be a part of this.
Wonderful answer. And I think that your answer to that, again, connects back to the last conversation that we had too about artistic expression and freedom for who, right? Again, we see the ways in which in your last answer, there can be a profound abuse of artistic freedom to express oneself, especially when that freedom is being abused to target to target people violently, especially those that are vulnerable. In this case, specifically in the last instance, we talked about the targeting of gender non-conforming people. But then again, it can also be used, as in this example in your own life, to suppress something as innocent, right? As a beautiful poster that is based on a sculpture. And so I think it really draws our attention to the ways in which we have to think really critically about the freedom of artistic expression, how power is positioned in that, and who gets to partake in these opportunities, right? And to what end. And I think that you have always been incredibly responsible with the ways in which you have used yours, and you've illuminated the ways in which that kind of subversive expression can be used to protect the vulnerable and express some of the most necessary things that need to be expressed. All right, let's move to number 5. To this day, your historic 1977 solo comic Fresh Gazizis remains banned in England under the basis of obscenity. The book was one of many comics imported by Knockabout Press in 1985 and seized for containing pornographic material. When brought to trial, you defended your work gracefully, stating, "I told the magistrate that my book had been written as a personal document. And although there was sexually explicit material in it, that was only because the stories had to do with my feelings as a woman living in a sexually violent society, and that part of the story I wanted to tell concerned the violence perpetuated against me." Concerning this, how did it feel to have hundreds of copies of Fresh Gazizis burned before the book itself was given an ongoing criminal status and pronounced illegal to import or possess, while male sex books remained on the shelves, as you note at the end of the comic, Public Enemy?
It's almost as if I'd written a macho riposte to my own situation. It again, it made me feel like I'd done something important. The judge was very polite to me. He'd only been given the comics as he came into the courtroom, so he hadn't had a chance to look at them. And he said, well, I appreciate what you said, and because you've been so, clear about this and what it means to you, he said, I'll give it another week. So he gave it another week, and then he had everything banned and burned. And it was said to me, and I can only say it's an alleged thing because I don't know for sure, but I did hear that I guess he was a magistrate actually, it was told to me that he was the father of Richard Branson, the media mogul over here in England, and my comic had been on the spinners in Branson's Virgin Records only a few weeks before it was taken. Also, none of the other books that were picked up were burned or banned, and many of them were by men. So yes, it kind of falls into place in a marvelous absurdity I would never have thought that something that I did would cause the taxpayer to have to pay for a ridiculous trial like this when pornography was everywhere, done by men.
Yeah. And I think so importantly, right, done by men. And so it seems to be at the core of it, the offense, right, is that you as a woman wanted to assert yourself erotically. And that was necessarily and structurally suppressed because it didn't fit the patriarchal framework about what was acceptable erotica and what was not.
Hmm.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now number 7. Considering the ongoing impact of censorship, historians are currently alarmed with Trump's attempt to rewrite US history. According to an article in The Guardian, under an executive order issued in January, the president has started to churn out his own approved version of US history that professional historians fear will resort to the tried and tested authoritarian playbook of airbrushing out inconvenient and inglorious chapters that do not align with his visions of American greatness. Given this context, do you think the suppression of history is representative of fascism? And what do you think the objective of perpetuating this ignorance is?
I think the value of perpetuating this kind of ignorance is to keep people isolated from each other, from the history of their background. In England, for instance, history goes back a lot further than in America, although, you know, it was English people who went over and settled America, but they worked their way in with genocide. And so they have to tell, I think the Old West is about as old as they can go, and it's been written and rewritten and rewritten to make the Old West look great. The whole cowboys and Indians thing, slavery, you know, there never was an official ending date to slavery, I understand, in America. There has been here. But yeah, this is the rewriting history. I noticed it when I was in Russia that everything got, you know, I was told everything got changed all the time because at that point I didn't know much about how things worked in the world. But the Annenerbe Society in Germany, with the rise of Hitler, Himmler started that society in order to leech stories from other cultures, like, for instance, the Arthurian legends, which were originated by Geoffrey of Monmouth. But in England, you can trace things back. I think it's very interesting, even though we've had plenty of rotten rulers in England, the people keep track of what happened because it's there in history books everywhere. You know, it's definite. You know, it doesn't seem quite the same as, say, in Russia or in America. You know, where there's a kind of a, I think the rewriting is part of covering up one's, you know, little feces. You know, well, we don't want to talk about that. We'll rewrite it. Thanksgiving, yay! That was when the Indians helped us out. You know, and then we killed them. You know, and I visited Hawaii, and I thought the people were marvelous, and it was beautiful where I stayed. I didn't stay in big hotels. I stayed in a sort of a pocket of Hawaii that's more local to the people, and they're very polite, lovely people, but they don't mix with Americans, and God bless them for that. It was upsetting to feel how bad I felt being an American, you know, there, but it's a lesson, and it's an important lesson, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And especially an important lesson, right? In ongoing neocolonialism and the ways in which indigenous populations have to continue to protect themselves, right? Even as they're being under siege, even by the tourist industry specifically. Wonderful insights, Melinda. All right, let's move to number 8, if you're okay with that. Okay. Recently, the image of the pirate flag made popular by the globally successful manga and anime One Piece has been used to galvanize largely Gen Z protesters across the world, from Nepal last month to Madagascar this month, as a symbol of anti-establishment and anti-corruption. Other movements have used the Guy Fawkes mask, worn by the character V in V for Vendetta, to symbolize similar sentiments. How do you view the role and power of art when it comes to political movements? How has that role changed, and how has it remained the same?
How has the role, sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
How has the role and power of art when it comes to political movements changed or remained the same?
Well, obviously communication has grown massively, and I think we're going towards, I think we're finding our strengths, and I think, you know, younger generations are doing massively important things and organizing together. And I think one of the reasons that things are changing is because we need community. We need community with like-minded people. We need to be able to trust in each other. I know coming up in San Francisco, I had no real friends. I had nobody I could trust, and there was nobody who trusted me, and nobody was willing to do that because everybody was trying to be on their own little island, and everyone was on the offensive or the defensive. And we can't get anywhere without trust and without talking about how we feel. And I find that's a much stronger dynamic here in England. But then I left San Francisco. I think I visited it in 2015. So I stopped being actively part of it in 1982. But I see a lot more mutual trust, and I see a lot more people realizing we have to do things in communities. We have to, because the enemy, it's it's like a bunch of vicious lemmings just trying to drag everybody they can, you know, with the rotten governments and the inhumanity and the soullessness.
Yes. Wonderful insights yet again. And thank you for, again, directing our attention to the reasons why community and solidarity are so important, especially in the realm of artistic expression, because I agree with you, that is essential to our progress, if any progress is to be made in our current political climate. All right, our last 2 questions are coming from students. So my first student question, and I was only able to include 2 questions from students today. So I'm very happy for all the students who joined. If your question wasn't included, that's okay. You'll still get extra credit for your participation, and we're very happy to have you here. And Melinda is especially very happy to have you be a part of the event. So first student question, as you watch a new generation of artists emerge, do you think that we have come far as a society, and what kind of artwork we platform? Have people, women specifically, always been able to express their wants and desires in their art, or has censorship, sexism, racism, homophobia, and purity culture affected that?
I think, wow, yeah. I think the forces against personal freedom ever since the industrialization of life, this is a very important question. Can Can you repeat to me the last sentence so that I can focus, because my mind is going in about 3 different directions.
Absolutely. It was a very complex question, so very understandable. So, have people, women specifically, always been able to express their wants and desires in their art? Or has censorship, sexism, racism, homophobia, and purity culture affected that?
Oh, most definitely, all of the above. You know, a favorite artist of mine, Austin Osman Spare, lived in a basement and painted what a lot of people would call demons. And I think the only reason that he was able to keep on with his career was that it was wartime. He was very, very poor. He slept on 2 chairs put together. He had a single light bulb, and he managed to complete his world. And I think if you sometimes you have to protect your legacy so much. I mean, I was friends with Eduardo Paolozzi, a very famous sculptor here. And he asked me, I showed him my portfolio, and he said, "Why aren't you famous?" And I said, "I don't want anybody hurting me. I don't want anybody telling me what to do." And of course, you know, the trial and that kind of thing, as preposterous as it was, how as unnecessary and frivolous it was, it still came to pass, even though I had practically no profile, you know, and I wanted it that way because I wanted to complete my legacy without interruption. And I'm afraid that's what a lot of creative people still have to do. I don't think it's changed that much.
Yeah, we are still under siege from so many structural forces. Again, that this student was so very insightful to list from, again, sexism, racism, homophobia, purity culture. But going back to our earlier discussion, I would also include transphobia as well. That also,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and particularly in this regard, because this question is about women, I would think of trans women, right? The ways in which they're impacted and suppressed from their expression as well, by the
Yeah,
ongoing forces of cis heteronormativity that
yeah.
violently pervades society. All right, now last question. This is also a student question. Do we think women have largely overcome discrimination and sexism in the political arena in the United States and abroad?
I think I think this is a human work in progress. You know, I feel emotional about it, and I want so much for women to feel the power of their humanity. And I just hope everybody keeps working at that. We are not just, you know, dolls or objects or all the other tired things that we've been made. And and trans people are in a very fragile position. And um, we must protect those whom we can in any way we can.
Absolutely. And I think that your work is ultimately, again, incredibly responsible, especially in its subversive nature. Everything that you've always drawn, especially in its shocking nature, its grotesque nature, was always in an effort to illuminate where power was centered and where people who are being impacted by that power could still resist, could still rage, could still fight for themselves. I think that's been inherently a part of your legacy, and that's what makes you such a powerful and profound artist. So then my last question before we end the event today is there anything else you would like to share with the world, Melinda?
I'm glad I got to start winning my own little race, and that it wasn't, because from the time I was a teenager, I thought, or young adult anyway, I can't remember what I thought it. But when I was drawing all these things that satisfied me and made me feel like I was just and right to do these things, I thought it's okay if it never, nobody ever recognizes my work while I'm alive. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that somebody has to do it. And it's very edifying to be sitting here and being able to have communication with wonderfully intelligent people who care about the same things that I do. It's a very important moment for me, really.
Wonderful. It's been so, so, so beautiful to see you here today and to spend time with you and to hear from you and to have the privilege and the gift of your presence and your incredible insights in this interview. Thank you, Melinda.
It's been wonderful communicating with everyone that's been involved, listeners and questioners alike. You know, it's been wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all.
Morgan, are there any closing remarks?
I want to say just thank you again so much, Melinda Gebbie, for giving us the time and energy that you've gifted to us. And thank you so much to Dr. Melanie West for organizing and hosting this event and providing so much information and conversation. We really appreciate you. Again, this event is hosted by the Graduate Student Caucus of the Comic Studies Society, and I invite folks to check out our website, especially folks who maybe didn't know about us before. These are the kinds of events that we host, and we love to give a platform to folks like Dr. Melanie West and Melinda Gebbie. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate you.
And thank you, honey. And thank you, Melanie, for everything you've done. You're amazing. I'm so overjoyed to know that all of you exist and that you're interested in my work. It's a great honor. Thank you so much.